People who spend all sorts of time worrying about their, quote, gender identity, end quote, and personal pronouns are not worried about where their next meal is coming from, or whether jackbooted goons representing the government will come in the dark of night, kick in their door, and drag them off to a gulag for crazy people. This Tommy rot requires a free, prosperous, and really generous nation in order to take root. Without such a nation, the gender, race, and climate fraudsters would never even have a movement. They'd be afraid to show their faces, much less express their nonsense out loud. In life, context is often really important for understanding things better. At this time in our nation's history, we have people spending a lot of time trying to figure out what pronouns they want people to use when talking about them. What's the first thing you think of when you hear this? Easy. Someone has a lot of time on his or her hands. I use those pronouns on purpose. And pronouns and gender identity eccentricities are definitely a rich and free country problem. Do you think that anyone in the Islamic Middle East worries about his gender identity or his pronouns? How about people in North Korea, in communist China? How about people living in huts made of cow dung in Africa? Someone worrying about his pronouns is not worrying about where his next meal is coming from, or whether government goons are going to come that night, kick in his door, and drag him away to some gulag for crazy people. By the way, this pronouns and gender identity gibberish is not common in poor areas of rich and free countries either. People struggling to put food on the table are not spending their time gazing at their own navels wondering about whether the appendages on their body are correct for their gender identity. In other words, if your nation spends a considerable amount of time as a prosperous and relatively free one, it will smoke out the myriad ways in which people with too much free time on their hands and few basic worries can go crazy. In Ukraine recently, we learned that the government doesn't give the teeniest, tiniest hoot about your gender identity when the Russians are coming. When the Russians invaded, the Ukrainian government immediately announced that trans women were not allowed to flee the country. And why? Well, because, as everyone knows, trans women are actually men, and men are needed to fight in the war against the Russians. Trans women is the politically correct term for men who pretend that they're women. Trans men, on the other hand, or women who pretend to be men, are free to leave the country because they are not needed to keep the Russian bear away. Why? Because they're women. And everyone knows it. Or, when things get really dicey, we all understand that the whole pronouns and gender identity controversy is nothing but one big scam. No one believes any of it. Not even the ones bullying everyone else to proclaim that it's all true. Especially not the ones bullying everyone else to proclaim that it's all true. So, it turns out, the whole pronoun and gender identity hogwash requires a rich and free nation, and one that is not under threat from a powerful external enemy. Or, the gender silliness requires rich, spoiled, lazy, self-obsessed, generally young people with a whole lot of time, people who have the time to latch on to the craziest impulses their brains can fabricate and then run with them. This is why we see all manner of transparently nutty stuff these days. Math is racist, boys can be girls and vice versa, merely by saying it's so. Astronomy is racist, did you know that? And much more. And of course all this nuttiness comes from that area of Western life that is the most disconnected and removed from real life, academia. Only highly credentialed intellectuals could dream up stuff this nonsensical and this stupid, and then have the intellectual agility to sell it to other people. Not that it's all that difficult. After all, if it says PhD after his name, that means he's really smart, right? And that I should believe him that boys can be girls and vice versa, and that 2 + 2 is not equal to 4. And if I continue to insist that it is, then I'm a racist, and so on, right? I mean, it says PhD after his name, and we call him doctor. In America, if you're stupid, meaning that you have limited intellectual capacity to start, it'll be difficult for you to obtain a higher education. But there's another side to being stupid too. Also in America, you can have a really massive intellectual capacity and fill it with the stupidest of stuff. This makes you far stupider than the guy who barely made it out of high school. In the West, really high education can make you truly stupid. In America, frequently, the humblest of garbage haulers has a far more positive impact on the world around us than the most respected ivory tower intellectual. The highly educated stupid are actively, aggressively aggressively stupid. They cultivate their stupidity, constantly seeking out better ways and words to express the nitwittery they're regularly immortalizing in thick tomes for use in spreading their half-wittery to other grad students and intellectuals. They hone and massage their stupidity, forever improving the sophistication with which they express it. And these people produce a blizzard of arcane-sounding phrases filled with neologisms and other inventions to convince you and me that boys can be girls and vice versa, merely by saying that they are. And again, it's all because we're a rich and free nation, a nation that hasn't had to worry about a powerful external menace for a generation and a half. These are the people who have fabricated all the pronoun and gender identity codswallop. These are the people who propose to upend the fundamental ways we communicate with each other in order, allegedly, to cater to the fragile egos of a minuscule subset of the population, far less than 1%. This subset of the population who is confused about boys and girls. In America, we don't have to mistreat those poor confused ones, but we don't have to deny reality on their behalf either. We can just say no. More and more people in America are realizing all of this. They are standing up and they are saying no, no more. It's been a real hoot exploring the leftist fever dreams of gender identity and race and climate and all the rest of the Tommy rot they've been cooking up in their isolated, calm, peaceful ivory towers. But the nation and the world have real problems to contend with, and we all need to stop wasting our time with truly, transparently stupid nonsense. Let's hope this particular sleeping giant hasn't awakened too late to fix it all.